Oh,
Hi, I'm Ross Porter. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to have a simulcast of a feature, not only for our website, Ross Porter Sports, but also for our founder and engineer, Mike Cunard, and his website, I Remember the Inland Empire. For those who may not know, the Inland Empire is a metropolitan area 60 miles east of Los Angeles. And it's an area so large, in fact, it's bigger than 10 of the states in America. If you're not familiar with me, I'm a sports announcer. I was on Channel 4 in Los Angeles for 10 years. And then for 28 seasons, I was one of the play-by-play announcers on radio and television for the Los Angeles Dodgers. This program, though, is not sports related. It's a success story about a member of my family and how he built one of the most prominent American shrines in Southern California. That is the Lincoln Memorial Shrine in Redlands, California, the only museum and research center dedicated to the Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War west of the Mississippi River. Joining me today is my best friend and wonderful wife of 61 years, Lynn, and an expert on the Lincoln Shrine, historian and director emeritus of the A.K. Smiley Library, which was next door to the shrine, Dr. Larry Burgess. We thank both of you for being here today. It's great to see you again, Larry, but I'm going to have Lynn, first of all, talk about Uncle Robert.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. Ross and I were married 61 years ago into the Porter family, and it didn't take long for me to hear about Uncle Robert and the pride the family has in him. And I was immediately fascinated because I love history and I love Abraham Lincoln. So it was with great pleasure that when we moved to California, we were able to go to Redlands and know more about the Lincoln Shrine. And we've been to reenactments on Lincoln's birthday and on Juneteenth. And so anyway, we're thrilled to be here today to learn more from Larry Burgess.
Larry, how many years have you devoted your life to the Abraham Lincoln Shrine?
You know, I was thinking about that the other day because this is the 90th anniversary year of its founding and gift from Robert and Alma Watchorn to the people of Redlands. And I've got to honestly tell you, my first brush was as a Cub Scout. This is in the 1950s, when we would march in the annual Lincoln Day Parade. And then I would go to the Lincoln dinners. And so before I even knew that I would end up working there in any way, I was very familiar with these wonderful speakers that were brought as a result of Robert Watchorn's vision to create such an event on Lincoln's birthday, February 12th. And then I began working there 50 years ago this month, and I changed my life and my direction. So I went from a cubby looking sort of curiously to then somebody, yikes, in charge.
Well, first, let me give everybody the background to this story, and then we'll get back to you and talk to you even more about this. Robert Watchorn was my grandmother's brother, making him my great uncle. I never met him because he died when I was very young in 1944. But I'll tell you, I cannot tell you the number of times that my dad, who felt he was one of his greatest heroes, would talk about Uncle Robert. He was an English-American coal miner, union leader, immigration commissioner, businessman, and philanthropist. In his later years, Watchorn worked in the oil business and he amassed quite a sizable fortune. Robert was born in Alfreton, England in 1859 and began working grueling shifts in a coal mine when he was 11 years old. He was paid 24 cents a day. He said he never opened one of his paychecks until he was 21 years old. He gave all his earnings up until then to his mother, to help her pay her bills. Uncle Robert had a limited formal education, but he attended night school in England. But he was ambitious and he set high moral standards for himself. He was 22 when he came to the US, and he worked 5 years in the coal mines near Pittsburgh. A year later, he brought his parents, 3 brothers, and 2 sisters, including my grandmother, to this country. My grandfather became a coal mine superintendent in Pennsylvania. Active in his union, Robert Watchorn eventually was made the first secretary of the United Mine Workers of America. He helped end child labor in Pennsylvania. Watchorn worked for the U.S. Immigration Service for 14 years. And finally, after being an inspector at Ellis Island in 1905, President Theodore Roosevelt appointed him as the 5th Commissioner of Immigration at Ellis Island, where he ended many abuses. Robert also instituted reforms at Ellis Island, including construction of a small island on which were built hospitals and new dormitories. Well, when Teddy Roosevelt left office, Uncle Robert entered the oil business in 1909, first as treasurer of the United Oil Company of California, where his salary was $6,500 a year. In 1912, Watchorn resigned, went to Oklahoma, started his own oil company, developed a very, very successful oil field that produced 5% of our nation's total crude oil production at one time. In 35 years, that field alone produced 213 million barrels of oil. And that was not his only oil discovery. My dad's brother also moved to Oklahoma after Uncle Robert, and in time, my dad joined them out there. Robert and his wife Alma made Redlands their winter home, as did many millionaires who lived in the East. The Watchorn son, Ewart, visited England before World War I, and when he came home, he told his father, the English people were mostly of the Abraham Lincoln type, and if they knew more about Lincoln, they would appreciate America even more. Ewart Watchorn became one of the very first U.S. pilots in World War I at age 21. America's Air Force was not involved at that time, and so he joined an Italian unit whose leader was Fiorello LaGuardia, who later became mayor of New York. Ewart's plane had an open cockpit, and he developed pneumonia because of prolonged exposure to zero weather in an alpine vigil over Austria. He never fully recovered. He came home and 2 years later died at 25 of complications. His bereaved parents envisioned the shrine as a way to honor their son's memory, as both Robert and Ewart had admired President Lincoln. The shrine was dedicated in 1932. Since then, 2 new wings have been added, and this year, the supporters of the shrine in Redlands, as Larry said, celebrated their 90th anniversary, and they even had a fireworks show to cap it all off. So I'm back to Lynn and Larry. Larry, is the shrine open Tuesday through Sunday from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock?
Yes, those are the afternoon hours are for the public and the free admission. And the morning hours are largely for tours of school groups. So that's why there's a bifurcation there.
And Larry, I talked to you about the fact that you were the emeritus of the A.K. Smiley Public Library. Isn't there a research collection located in the Heritage Room there? It's acceptable, I think, by appointment only, isn't it?
Yeah, I can just quickly explain that. That's what brought me to the work 50 years ago. the trustees and the director wanted to combine the holdings in local, regional, and California history that the library had built up over the years. And they felt that the Lincoln Shrine material should be managed along with that. And they felt they needed an archivist and an historian. And so that's how I ended up in the job. I was thinking of it only as temporary because I had in my mind gold dust of thoughts of teaching in college. Boy, am I glad that faded. And I went to where the real gold was, and that was this wonderful lifetime work with Lincoln and, of course, the Watchorn family.
Now, Lynn went to Alfredton at one time. Our daughter has been to Alfredton. Lynn, tell us about your thinking as you visited there.
Well, I was there about 20 years ago with a couple of girlfriends, and I told them about this story, and they said, well, let's just get in the car and we'll drive to Alfredton. And it was near Nottingham, which I found so interesting with my knowledge of Robin Hood. And we found it. We went into the church. There was not a service going on, but there were people in and out. I got to look, see the plaque that Uncle Robert had dedicated to his mother. I was so touched. And I knew there was a place where Lincoln memorabilia was stored. And I was very, very touched at the beautiful church. There's a picture of it, I think Mike's going to show later, but it's quite beautiful. And Uncle Robert went back to build it in honor of his mother. But our daughter went back about 30 years ago with her high school class, and they made an appointment there and went in. And the church people were just absolutely thrilled to have a member of the Porter family connected to the Watchorn family, because of course it was such a historical church. So that was a joy to visit.
Larry, you've been to Alfredton twice, haven't you?
Right. Yes, both occasions. I was able to meet with some people that actually remembered knowing Mr. Watchorn, and one woman who had sat on his knee and at a special church function had given her as a token, a coin, English coin, and which she still had.
Oh, how wonderful.
Wow. Well, let's go back to the Lincoln Shrine itself and talk a little bit about that. I know that people who go there, Larry, are going to see Civil War artifacts, even sentimental keepsakes from the Lincolns themselves, right?
Right. Absolutely. We need to remind everybody, I think it's most important, that Robert Watchorn and his son Ewart, when he was a teenager, joined together and would look for material for the collection. And indeed, Ewart owned part of that collection, which then was left in his estate, obviously, to his parents. So I feel a very strong emotional pull when this very small, simple plaque says to the memory of Ewart Watchorn as a memorial of what that must have meant to a family that never really, I think, got over its grief of loss.
Right.
So to me, it takes on a very personal aspect. So the cufflinks that belonged to Lincoln, and a cane that was associated with Lincoln and the railroad in Illinois, the Illinois Central, a host of documents, fantastic books that Robert had friends of his autograph, especially to give to the Lincoln Shrine, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, all these incredible names out of American history that were friends of his. It was quite a collection, remains quite a collection.
Yeah.
And
one very valuable addition to the shrine is a post-World War II Norman Rockwell painting that was donated by my Uncle John. And what it does is it recognizes Lincoln's legacy nearly a century after his death. Now, if you study this, a disabled veteran in uniform is the central focus of the piece, but his eyes are locked on the top left corner of the frame. If you look up there, you can see a bust of Lincoln, which is partially in view. What a tremendous addition to the shrine, Larry, to have that.
It's
And-
it's an unbelievable story. Mr. Porter found out that this painting was being done for the Saturday Evening Post for the interior article on Lincoln's birthday for 1944 for February. And with it was a poem by Carl Sandburg.
Yes.
And that was the setting, painting against the other side of the poem. It's a beautiful piece to look at in the magazine. And so the inquiry was made, and it turned out that Rockwell had the painting in Pasadena, where it had been finished. And he said that he would be happy to give it to the Lincoln Memorial Shrine if they would but come and pick it up. Can you imagine?
Wow.
And so we have the letters about the painting. We have the correspondence from Porter and all how it came about. And today it's really one of the great treasures that people come to see. It's his only allegorical painting that Rockwell ever did. It's all about symbolism for the ending of World War II. It's very moving.
May I point out what moved me so much when I studied it is the picture below of the immigrants with their, struggling to be free. And they're all colors. You can tell they're from different countries, children, women, men. And then this man is reaching down with a hand to help them up. And Lincoln is on top of that with his, but we thought Lincoln looked amazingly like Norman Rockwell. But here's
yeah, I agree with you.
here's the veteran who had returned missing a limb with his crutch, and people praying, and the cross and the dog tag on the cross showing someone who didn't come home. It is allegorical, and I love studying it. And so I hope if people go there, they make a pilgrimage to study this painting.
We've actually had people who are Rockwell, aficionados, or
Yeah.
who've come just to, and then, oh, by the way, they look around at everything else and go, whoa, what is all this? But it's great when passion like that brings people to a place.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Larry, I have listened to some of the interviews that you have done, outstanding interviews, by the way, talking about the Lincoln Shrine. And here are some of the words you have used. And if you want me to stop and let you talk about each one or several of them, please do. But you've used the word complicated, heroic, human rights, unity. Those are the first four that I have.
I think that people always seem to want, in many of these interviews, give me a word that most describes Lincoln. And I've got to tell you, there really isn't one word that can equally apply. His character and his ability to learn from mistakes really propels him almost into another world. Now, I suppose many viewers may say, well, but what about, keeping the Union together and the 13th Amendment to end slavery and all that? Well, of course, those are the major achievements of his presidential reign. But it's the mark of character that propelled him to that by a man that knew his place. He understood himself. He often questioned himself to a fault. He had very strong emotional ups and downs. But to me, that is the remarkable story, that he could bring us through the only civil war in our history and accomplish so many other things with so little on a resume that would show that he was going to be the guy for the time.
Yeah. We remember the story, and we've heard it several times, about when he was nominated to be president, he was playing baseball, and they came out to tell him that he'd been nominated. He said, they'll have to wait until I finish my at bat to get my acceptance.
Well, that's the other wonderful thing, is his sense of humor.
Yes.
He always had a great turn of phrase. And some of that humor, it's always interesting to talk to younger groups. I once had to do a father and son church lecture. And it was about, they wanted Lincoln as the perfect father and the boys as the perfect children. Well, it's anything but that. And some of his stories are, let us say, a very basic farm-like stories from the 19th century. And
Mhm.
so I couldn't tell any of those. And it was probably one of the worst talks I ever gave because I just danced around the whole subject.
Well, you've also said, and I thought this was very interesting, you have said a touchstone of philanthropy, touchstone of education, touchstone of culture, touchstone of program. Touchstone.
That is really a tribute to Robert Watchorn and Alma in what they wanted to have done with the Lincoln Shrine about Lincoln's life. Robert Watchorn's own words, I think, are among the best to describe it, that Lincoln, is his words, not mine, turned the current of freedom into the American soul.
Mm.
So that is sort of the charge that we have. And when he created the nonprofit board, the Watchorn Lincoln Memorial Association, upon which I currently am a member, it was with a strong purpose to see the Lincoln collection through into the future and to expand the building and to do all the words you just used as their guidepost, as their touchstones by which to form their, their work. It's a wonderful pairing that you bring all that up.
You also have discussed in length the generosity of the people who have supported this project and people who realize the big picture of what this means to the, you call it the historical fabric.
I think that's one of the important goals that we have. There's a tendency now, not unneeded, to demystify a lot of things within the confines of American history and its thinking. It's always an evolutionary work anyway. It's human beings writing stories about us. And so you're getting different perspectives. And we take a great delight in the challenge to make people realize that within them are the qualities that Lincoln so well harnessed.
Mm-hmm.
And that this is not some mythical, distant person, but it was somebody who had ambition, who was sharp as a tack, who had a deep conscience and a strong sense of right and wrong, and someone that when given a pretty unpleasant situation, stood up to the task rather than run from it or shirk it or sort of manipulate it, or worst of all, if you look at a number of people on the stages of the world's countries today, take off and leave the problem to somebody else. So it's a great lesson for people.
But 90 years, the people of Redlands in particular have given great support. And of course, so many of them weren't even born in those days,
Exactly. And part of the other thing, Robert Watchorn was pretty visionary about this. He said that this would be perhaps one of the rare museums to Lincoln in the Civil War. And it turns out that was true in 1932, and it still is the only such operation full-time to Lincoln in the Civil War west of the Mississippi.
Yeah.
And he also said at the dedication, someday Redlands will become part of Los Angeles, and this entire area will be one vast urban, intertwined group of cities. And that's why I have chosen here, because this makes sense for the way the future is going to go. Yeah. Remarkable.
And what we're really talking about is Riverside and San Bernardino counties in particular.
Righto, right.
Has it been difficult for you and others to enlist people to help you support the shrine over the years?
We've been able to identify over the years, or they've identified us perhaps is a way to better put it, people who have an interest in that period of American history, but also in the lesson that Lincoln represents, and the questions that surround that area. So we've been very fortunate. And then we have a terrific volunteer group that starting 50 years ago, when we started the docent program, it's amazing. So it's been a truly giving experience. It hasn't been, oh, there's the usual headaches that you have, but boy, they're outweighed so much by seeing the accomplishments of people visiting.
Dr. Larry Burgess with us, and my wife, Linda, and better known as Lynn to everybody who loves her. Larry, is it known how many people have visited the Lincoln Shrine?
Boy, that's kind of a tough one to say.
Well, yeah, 90 years.
Yeah, over 90 years. I'd say probably it's close to 1 million, which sounds a lot, but over the 50 years, people need to remember Redlands had only about 15,000, 14,000 people in 1932.
Yeah.
And, we were still growing citrus in the 1970s. So,
Right.
but yeah, it's been exciting to see all that come through.
And Redlands has been Redlands before there was ever a Palm Springs mentioned, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
A lot of people. Go ahead.
Larry, tell us about the opportunities for people to come and see reenactments and concerts. We went to a concert in that Under the Dome.
Sure.
I have that CD. I love it. It's such plaintive, wonderful music that I get tears. It's like Ken Burns's special on the Civil War. It's
right.
Wonderful music. I wonder if the live concerts still happen, and will there be a reenactment for Juneteenth?
There's always a concert every holiday season in December, when we bring a Civil War group playing, many of them the actual instruments of the time. Yeah. And there's a selection of hymns and songs and all sorts of things. That's very popular. The reenactments take place at the Lincoln birthday celebration, which has a big open house, and there are speakers and all of that sort of, even the firing of a cannon. And to make a long story short, throughout the rest of the year, there are different events. So the answer is yes, and even more than what I'm saying.
And I love it that Lincoln, a man impersonating Lincoln, is always walking around with his top hat. Our grandchildren were just blown away. I mean, this is quite an opportunity, and to visit all that. But what about Juneteenth? Is anything being done?
Yes, actually, we were the first museum agency in San Bernardino, Riverside County to do a Juneteenth activity and speakers. This was about 7 years, 8 years, maybe a little longer, maybe 10 years ago. And we've got, there's a plan for this year. We're part of another group. And then next year, there's going to be a rather more elaborate and larger one. And so, yeah.
Also, we should mention the fact that Uncle Robert felt very, very torn toward his loyalty to the city of Redlands. And there's a building in his name on the campus at the University of Redlands.
He went out to golf with Elam Anderson, the president of the University of Redlands, on numerous times up at the Redlands Country Club. And Elam made a proposition that would Robert Watchorn like to give funds for a building that would bear his name. Unfortunately, fortunately, he said yes, but unfortunately, he died before the building could be. But the university, looking around, said, we think that it would honor Robert Watchorn and the kind of person he was if we named the School of Music building Watchorn Hall.
Oh,
so yeah, so that's still going today, of course, and that's where the headquarters of the school is.
A book, the autobiography of Robert Watchorn, was published in 1959.
Right.
And listed in the back of the book, several pages worth, were the donations that he made over the years. And it came out to be 24 charities.
Yeah.
12 of those were churches. And the total that Robert Watchorn donated was nearly $4.5 million between 1915 and 1957. Think how much money that was for that time period.
It's many millions of dollars in today's money. Yeah, it's a huge impact on philanthropy.
And he spread it out all around the country.
And we have the original in the collection of that painting.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
This is signed to us the year we got married from Ross's dad. It's very dear.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Read in the last part.
As you commence the travel along life's highway, Uncle Robert would be proud to know that his autobiography had been published and that you were presented a family volume, which I have the pleasure to give to you, together with the love and good wishes from the entire Watchorn Porter clan. Dad, July 1961.
That's a very lovely inscription. And I take great pleasure in saying that every time I go to the Ellis Island Museum and go to the section on Robert Watchorn's career there, it's a revelation of the kind of person he was, that the title of that exhibit is The Commissioner with a Heart.
Yeah, yeah.
Love it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And he ended abuse in several areas, didn't
you bet.
he? Yeah. Larry, I want to go back to the shrine and give you a chance to talk about some of the other highlights for the people who come. And is there any price at all for the people who come to visit?
No, the admission is free. And I'm pleased that it is, because it's a great thing to see people of all types and stripes and economic conditions being able to come and see this remarkable collection. They will find that we've got a good deal of both sides of the great American Civil War conflict. And it's a large manuscript collection that researchers come to use. And we have the exhibits change every year. Of course, at the open house, there's half of the new exhibits are made new. But I think people will be quite surprised at the depth and breadth, and that this is really right here in Southern California. So they won't be disappointed if and when they come.
Are there other things you'd like to spotlight?
We have, through a gift of one man in Redlands, whose father was greatly involved in the new Republican Party politics of 1859 and 60, a draft, or the final draft, actually, one of 3 drafts that were finalized in their form, but with some little changes. They're all there's a few words different. One of Lincoln's, arguably, besides the Gettysburg Address and the second inaugural, the letter to Conkling, defending his use of African-American soldiers in the war, and of the reason why the war must be won and the principles behind it. It's a stunning speech, and the original manuscript of that, read to a group in New York, lies in our collection. And when people come and read it, and the incredible words that Lincoln put down, a challenge, if you will, to the American public to keep it up, it's a remarkable. So we've got some very interesting and surprising things on that.
If you're in Southern California, the best way to come down is, I guess, on the 10 freeway.
Well, the I-10 will do it for much of Southern California. That's right. And if you're farther south, you'll come up on one of the other, one of our other great arteries, and it's easily gotten to.
Which off ramp is the best one if you're coming down the 10?
If you're coming down the 10 from Los Angeles, it would be the Orange Street off ramp.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're coming the other direction, it's the 6th Street
All
off
right.
ramp from Palm Springs. Yeah.
Larry, talk to us about this piece of art, which is so incredible.
Well, the whole reason for why the Lincoln Shrine is even in Redlands was that piece of art. Robert Watchorn was at a dinner party with a group of like-minded people, and many of them philanthropists in Redlands. And he said, I don't know what to do with it. This is George Gray Barnard, one of his great busts of Lincoln, the beardless Lincoln. And he said, does somebody have a suggestion? And finally, they said, well, it could go in a courtyard at one of the parks, or it could go. By the end of the night, they said, you know, it really ought to become a part of the library. So he was thinking, he's good friends with the Smiley family who gave the library. And then they thought it over and they said, no, you don't want a wing that's attached to the library. The library's got its own rhythm and service to the public. You need a separate structure. And that's when he went and he knew Elmer Gray, the architect of the Huntington Library House and the Beverly Hills Hotel. Ewart had interned in Gray's office.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Watchorn said, I want you to design a monument. And Gray said, I've never designed a monument in my life. He said, we're going to now. And that's how it all started.
Wow.
Around that bust.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing.
Larry, anything else you want to add? It's been such a thrill to be able to talk to you about this, and thank you for your knowledge of the subject.
Well, I want to just close by saying how thrilled I am that Mike has me on, and two, that to be with you folks is a real treat, because there's nothing like a family who carries on memory and tradition and is part of it, that can provide the kind of insight and spark that, as long as I've worked with it, I still can't give the same emotional that you bring. And of course, it was my first thrill then when I met Ross. I thought, I can't believe I'm listening to Mr. Dodger radio on baseball, because I was kind of nervous. You may not remember, but I thought this is from a long time of listening and admiration. So,
Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for the time you gave us today. This has been very, very not only interesting, but inspirational. And we wish you good health. Also, your wife, Dr. Char, who has
thank you.
Been your partner for so many years. And
yeah, only 50 compared to your 61.
Well, you're getting there. And thanks also to Mike Cunard, who put this all together. And we hope that people out in the Inland Empire enjoyed it as much as we did having you with us. Stay in good health, Larry, and we hope to see you soon in Redlands.
Thank you. Best to you folks.
Thank you.